Hello everybody, welcome to this video tutorial. My name is Jacob and I will guide you through this tutorial. In this tutorial we want to look at a plugin that has been recently published in the OpenSCD ecosystem. The plugin is called Template Update and its purpose is to update the data type template section through a selection by the user. Now, let's first look into the specification file that I've loaded with another plugin that allows us to look deeply in the structure of the data type template section. As we can see here, we have 4 logical nodes defined, 3-phase measurement, 3-phase current measurement of all the 3 phases. Then we have a switch control function with the position, double point controllable position, with the control model being direct coordinate security. And we have a very simple LLN0, so basically the minimum mandatory LLN0 logical node, with the behavior being defined as on, block, test blocked, and off. And another very common GGIO, a generic input and output function with 2 indicators, single point status indicators. If we open up the same logical nodes here, we'll see that we see the same structure in a different way. So for example, for the 3-phase measurement, we see that there's current with phases A, B, and C, where the phase C has a calculated value where the magnitude only is specified in the format of floating point, float 32 to be more precise, and the behavior with all the 5 different states. The CSWY with again the behavior specified and the position containing the cancel object and the upper object for the control, and the control model being direct coordinate security, and the rest being mandatory as defined by the standard. Then the logical node LN0. In the simplest case, the warning is something that I want to show you in detail with later, but let's first look into the so-called selection. So as been seen in the other plugin, it's just the behavior with the 5 states, and of course GGIO with again the mandatory behavior defined, but also then 1 indicator. There's only 1 indicator, and why? Another limitation of this plugin I want to show you later. But let's first stick with the 3-phase measurement. So what you can see here is the selection, all the green highlighted things. This is the information that you find in an SCL file, and this SCL file. But in addition to that, there are other data objects that you can see. And these data objects are parsed by this plugin through a file called NSD, namespace description. This is basically the tables that you can find in the I61850 7-4 and 7-3, partly 7-2 and 8-1, all in machine readable format, an XML file. So basically this plugin shows you what you can choose to have in a logical node if you want to stick with the namespace or as defined in AI61850. So what you can do then with the plugin is you can adapt an already defined specification and can add or delete information from into this specification. Let's work on an example. Let's say we, in addition to the magnitude, we also want to have the angle in as a floating point variable. we also decide to specify the residual current, and again as an angle. Now if we save this whole thing, save it, we see that we had an edit action thrown at OpenSCD, and let's look in the template editor if something changed. So we have still current, but then we have a data object residual come as well with the vector, and in this case both being floating point variables. So the changes have been automatically made in the background. So what's the special thing about it? Well, what the plugin does is it parses through the NSCL file and creates a so-called selection from it. So all these highlights that you see. And in addition to that, parses the NSD file and shows you what, in addition to the current selection, you can add and of course then remove from the file and still be in line with the namespace description of the IS61850. So in other words, it allows you to make your specification a bit more intuitive, a bit quicker than with a plugin as that. Okay, let's look at the other logical nodes. With the CSWI, we want to also make modifications. Let's assume we decided to not only have the control model direct with enhanced security, but we want to fix it to select before operate with enhanced security. And if we do that, we need to also add this structure to our SCL file to be able to send a select with value request to this specific data object. And then we also say we want to have the SBO timeout there, be able to specify the SBO timeout, and also an upper timeout makes sense for us to have. Again, let's save this and look at the result. So this logical node CSWI with its position has now, in addition to the previous data objects, an SBOW, the upper timeout and the SBO timeout, and the control model has been changed to select before operate with enhanced security. Okay, so what are the limitations of the plugin? Well, there are two. The first one is if you load a logical node that is already instantiated by an ID in the file, which should not be the case during specification, the plugin will give you a warning saying that if you swap the logical node, if you remove the old one, then you will have an invalid file at the end. The recommendation is just use this plugin only during specification and only on your specification files, and then update accordingly. But this update is not happening in this plugin. This is the first limitation. The second limitation is when you use logical nodes that are behaving outside of the NSD files. So let's look at the GGIO in detail. We see that we have two indicators, 1 and 2. However, in the NSD files, there are now multiple such indicators, which means that we cannot load a second indicator, which means that when we parse the file, the indicator 2 is being dropped. So if you make a modification here, and let's assume in the indicator you want to have a description added, and we save that file again. See, there's another warning saying that the logical node has additional data objects that is not defined in an SD, and therefore updating will lead to loss of data. And you can choose to proceed or cancel. If you proceed, we'll see that the logical node changed this structure and doesn't have an indicator 2 anymore. So this plugin can only be used if you decide to stay fully within the namespace description as defined by the standard, and does not serve you well if you add user-defined data objects to your logical nodes. This is something that we want to add later, but for now it is not possible. Alright, then thank you very much for listening to this short introduction of this plugin. I hope you like the plugin, and I hope some of you are going to be using the plugin.